We're going to call the meeting for the school committee for March 24th, 2022 to order. And while I love the music, we probably should turn it down a little bit.
We just have background music.
We're going to make a small adjustment to the order for tonight that's on the agenda. In particular, we're going to pull the student forward because she has something she's got to work on, so we want to let her go work on that thing. But after that, we'll have the presentation on the request to name the Reading Memorial High School track. We'll have the Student Resource Officer annual update, including our new officer, Cooper, and getting to meet him. Then we'll go through the usual public comment, consent agenda, and the rest of the reports. We'll move on to personnel action, which is including a vote on an MOU for our cafeteria employees, assignment of school committee members to joint labor committees, and the FY22 quarterly personnel update. And we will conclude the evening with the Student Opportunity Act submission review, discussion, and vote. So, with that said, can we get our motion to take things out of order?
Move to take out of order the student report.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Chuck. All in favor? All opposed? And it passes. So, Smrtha, you're on deck.
All right, so first off, last Friday we had our first Mr. RMHS in a very long time. We had 9 contestants and every act was entertaining and a great way to bring the senior class as well as the entire school together to enjoy the talents of our fellow peers. We were glad and certain that this show set a precedent for all the underclassmen who didn't really know or understand how big of a showcase and fundraiser this event is every year, and it was really lost on a lot of people during the pandemic, so we're really glad that the tradition will be continued with the same enthusiasm and comedy as always. Second, the last 2 weeks have been the real start of spring sports. A lot of tryouts have been happening and practices have been starting up. Track kids have been a bit saddened about their practices having been moved to other locations starting in April because of the turf getting redone, but everyone is eager to have a new field for the upcoming year. And lastly, tomorrow night we have an awesome event happening at the high school, and that is Karaoke Night. So far, it seems like there's a good number of people attending. Everyone from 8th grade and up is invited, 7:30 to 9:30 in the cafeteria tomorrow for $5, and it's going to be a great time. And I forgot to add this, but seeing Cooper here, it's been so great having a dog just like around the school. Everyone, when they come into school, that's the first thing they see, and they're like, oh my goodness, like, it's a ball of fluff. Like, come on, like everyone, it puts everyone in a great spirit. So we're really grateful to have him join us. And that's all I have.
Great, Smrtha, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Any questions? No? Okay. You're good to go.
Thank you.
Just grab those mics and send them over to Michelle here.
Luck.
Thank you.
You got it? Thanks, Carla. Okay, well, Carla takes care of that for us. We'll move to our next agenda item, and we have another motion real quick.
Move to take out of order item E1, presentation on request to name the RMHS track.
Do we have a second? Second. Seconded by Chuck. All right, all in favor? All opposed? Seeing none. Carl, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. How exciting is this for me? I'm ahead of a dog. That's awesome. That is awesome. Officer Lewis, you are a has-been. This dog's going to own the school. It's going to be unbelievable. Thank you very much for allowing me and John Fiore to speak in a minute. I come before you, as you all know, as she just referenced, the track is going to be replaced in the next couple weeks, and it seems to me this is a perfect time to dedicate it after truly a legend here at Reading, Hal Croft, which I believe everyone knows. I've given you all information that hopefully you've been able to review, but for the people at home, I do want to just outline some of the high points, if that's possible. I want to thank Michelle. She gave me some of the data of his employment history. Steve Algeri from the Daily Times Chronicle with some of the athletic accomplishments, and Kevin Bottomiller, the veterans agent in town. Really, when we look at dedicating, as you know, Reading Memorial High School is named after veterans. To the best of my knowledge, there's nothing that's been named, whether it's been a field, a library, an auditorium, a wrestling room, has been named after a veteran. Hal Croft would be the only veteran, to the best of my knowledge, that would have something named after him. And one of the things that with Hal. I graduated in '87. I was captain of the team. He was someone that was never, he was kind of a gruff man, shall we say, at times, in terms of he gave you the military, discipline at all times. And I ended up finding out 20 years later is that Hal was actually one of the most highly decorated Marines in the state of Massachusetts. You always knew he was a Marine, but you never knew what he actually accomplished. I did include his Silver Star award, and it's much too long to read the description of it, but what I would like to do is really talk about what he accomplished to get the Bronze Silver Award. And for the Silver Star, Hal was awarded following a battle near, he was given the Bronze Star, for patching up wounded soldiers and saving 4 lives after his corpsman was killed in the Battle of Hill 861 near Kayshawn. He was one of fewer than 30 Americans out of a company of 90 who survived that night. After a year of war and 2 bouts of malaria, Hal returned from Vietnam and went back to school. He left Villanova. As you all know, Vietnam was a very controversial war. And he was one of the few people that left college after his sophomore year and enrolled into the Marines and fought for our country. Besides the Silver Star and the Bronze Star, I'm sorry, Cooper, I'll speed it up. Hal was awarded the Vietnamese Cross for gallantry with Palm for courage in combat against the North Vietnamese. He accomplished was a display of heroic duty against the enemy. It is actually one of the highest awards the Vietnamese government gives out, and Hal was a recipient of that. The second pillar, I'd say, is as an educator. Hal was a teacher here at Red Memorial High School from 1970 to 2002. He taught the honors courses, and he was actually awarded the Disney McDonald's Teacher/Coach of the Year. Hal was someone that, as John will say, was many times, I had him as a freshman teacher, and I had to listen to many sermons, shall we say, of what took place in the classroom. And if you ever ended up calling him Coach Croft, usually it did not turn out well. And actually, one of his quotes from Sports Illustrated was, he said, "You got to be a humble icon. Croft will tell you," adding that he doesn't give a rat's tail, quote unquote, about all the success because I'm an English teacher first. This was a man who said this to Sports Illustrated. Millions of people read this, and instead of talking about his accomplishments, he talked about, I'm an English teacher first. I think that's really speaks about his character of how he looked at himself as an educator, not necessarily a coach. The third pillar is obviously as an athletic coach. These numbers are just ridiculous. I think everyone has probably coached or had their children playing sports. He didn't lose a match in 30 years. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. At the time, it was the longest winning streak in the country. You would never know it. The track program was on the back pages a lot of times on the Daily Times Chronicle. He was awarded, Coach Fiore's won multiple state titles, and he certainly can attest to how was named State Coach of the Year 6 times. Mind-boggling. Out of 350-something coaches, he won it 6 times. He was the National Federation Track Coach of the Year, Massachusetts High School Track. He's in the Massachusetts High School Track Hall of Fame. He won 262 straight matches. The numbers go back and forth because there was a couple of years where, because of some situations, he had to take a year off, whether or not he's going to be counted for the win there. Hal was someone, they won 30 straight track titles, and I know when everyone goes in the field house, I know coaching basketball, people come in and they look at the banners, and they think sometimes it's a typo. It was like 1971, 72, 73. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and people are just blown away with that. One of the things that Hal was always able to do was keep everyone grounded, and he took kids in from all, I'm going to say all walks of life. And what I mean by that is you have students that may not play football or basketball, but all of a sudden they excel in track. Kids that were, back in the day, they would say, in the 70s, the back parking lot kids that were, go in the back and smoke. He'd take kids like that and turn them into state champions. He didn't care where you came from, any walk of life, no politics or anything like that. If you could run, he would make you better. Hal's probably greatest accomplishment was the fact that We had the ability to make you feel as though you were on top of the world, every single kid. There was 120 kids on average, which represent about 25% of the student body that attended, that participated in track. Many times, back then we didn't have the internet, so we really didn't know what the other town was. He would convince us that Watertown, for instance, would be able to beat us, and we had to get really ready for that. We'd have 120 kids ready, waiting for Watertown to show up. They show up in a minivan, like 5 kids would come out of it. So it's like 5 versus 120, but Hal had convinced all of us the fact that we could lose to Watertown. He was a master manipulator of getting children to go to the next level. And really, the fourth pillar, I'd say, is really his community service. I'm a former school committee member. I think some of you actually, I believe Chuck served with Hal. I'm not sure if anyone else served with Hal. When he retired, he still wanted to stay involved, and he realized that the Reading school system was very, very precious to him. All 4 of his children went through Reading school system. And for 5 years, 1 year of which he was the chairman of the school committee. So I really look at all 4 pillars that when you're evaluating naming something after someone, Hal has certainly hit it out of the ballpark for that. So I know that you just have clarification questions. You're going to discuss this in the next April 7th meeting, I believe. I've done this relatively quiet because Dr. Tom was talking about earlier, has Hal found out yet that I'm doing this? I'm waiting for the phone to ring because someone's going to call him down on the Cape saying that we're doing this, is because he doesn't want any notoriety whatsoever. This is truly an honor. I think the town should say thank you back to him. I'm willing to bet that once word gets out on this, you're going to get inundated with letters of support. One of our former runners actually started a charter school down in Rhode Island. He named it after Hal. That school has flourished. Now there's actually 3 different schools throughout New England for that. He's meant so much to so many of us, and he was really a father to hundreds of kids here in the town of Reading. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Coach Fiore, if we still have enough time.
You have a few minutes, sure.
Thank you. I'm John Fiore. I was, currently I'm an assistant track and field coach, social studies department chairperson at RMHS, also head football coach. And like Carl, a captain in the boys track program in 1989. This is going to be difficult for me, and it's hitting me right now, how emotional this is going to make me about Hal. He turned a sport that is the ultimate in individual commitment into the greatest team program this storied athletic department has ever had. He took thousands of kids and gave them a place to belong, a place to achieve, and ultimately it bred success for each and every one of them. But it wasn't until I started coaching with him that I realized that how deeply he cared. One of my first meets that we had scored the JV results, he wanted them immediately. He wanted to see how kids were improving, where they were at, offer words of encouragement. Hal was, he was a special educator. That classroom that he had just below the old tower was one of 2 classrooms he had. And throughout the course of the day, he would talk Dickinson, Hemingway, and in the 90s, Seinfeld, all day long, teaching lessons of life, expressing to our kids then, now, and I think hopefully as we speak, those lasting lessons of what it means to be human. And that's what the track was, his ultimate teaching tool, what it meant to be human, what it meant to work hard, what it meant to sweat, what it meant to feel stress and confront stress with what he called, quote, kind of paraphrasing some of his favorite Hemingway lines, grace under pressure. When people needed you to step up and it was your responsibility to get 3rd place and you succeeded and you came through with that 3rd place point, it was as if you were the top athlete in the country, that you had just won an Olympic gold medal. And to speak to what Kyle said about making every student athlete feel special, that was part of it. But Hal was also a master communicator, still is a master communicator. He would take 120 kids and know what his audience was. I would tell one anecdote where after a practice where he had been particularly blunt with myself and a few other athletes about our compete level and how we were practicing. There was a young man that came in the locker room after a cold night, and he had gotten lost on one of the distance runs, and he had been jogging around trying to find his way back. And we had kind of thought, hey, Hal's going to rip the kid for getting lost and not staying up with the pack. And what I witnessed that night made me love and appreciate Hal Croft more than anything else. And he put his arm around this young man, sat him down, talked to him about how he was feeling, talked to him about what happened, talked to him about taking care of, taking a good warm shower so he doesn't get sick. Come see me tomorrow morning, and we'll talk about it a little bit more if you need me. I mean, he was embarrassed, and in the matter of minutes, he restored this kid's pride and his appreciation and his sense of self. That he walked out of that Fieldhouse locker room that night 10 feet tall with his shoulders back. And I just don't think there's been anybody like Hal since then or ever will be. And I think at Reading Memorial High School, where he spent so many glorious years in that English classroom of his, I think it's fitting that we can forever walk into that track facility and see his name and be reminded each and every day. The same way some of his comrades, when we walk in through that door each and every day, we see those names and are reminded of the sacrifice that they made for us. And I'll end on this. Hal told me a lot of stories over the 20-plus years we coached together, and one of the things that motivated him, and he's said this in the newspapers as well, was every time he sees a Reading uniform cross the finish line in triumph, he thinks of fulfilled potential. And what drove him was to get the best out of each and every one of those young men, because he saw so much wasted potential when he served in Vietnam. So I think at this time, I'd just like to deeply support and openly and enthusiastically support this request to name the track after Hal Croft. And thank you for your consideration, and I'm sorry for my rambling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Coach Fiore and Carl. The committee knows from the, packet, whatnot, we're not to provide any feedback in terms of pros, cons, or anything, but are there any clarifying questions that anybody has that they might want to have answered tonight?
We can't speak, is that for our next?
That's for our next meeting. Yeah, the deliberation of whether or not to accept the nomination is for the next meeting. I know you want to, Chuck. I know you do. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. It will be April 14th, Carl, is when we'll have that. Okay? And at that point, we will vote to either accept the nomination or not. And if we do vote to accept the nomination, we'll also work to establish a subcommittee to review it, an advisory committee to review it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask a question?
You may ask a question. Is it of me or of them?
Of you.
Okay.
Is the advisory, the way I took the advisory committee, it was if there were multiple options. Is that?
No, it's more of a research committee, just to make sure, vetting, making sure that everything is in order, and that they would come back and recommend the nomination as well.
Okay.
Good point of clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have our next item, which we'll also vote to take out of order, is our Student Resource Officer Annual Update.
I move to take out of order item E2, Student Resource Officer Annual Update.
Seconded by Carla. And all in favor? All opposed? Seeing none, it passes 6-0. All right, Officer Lewis and Officer Cooper.
Sit on the floor for this part.
He's camera shy.
I think I was talking to my family tonight, and I said, we need a new school committee picture, and we need Cooper in the school committee picture. So just, no pressure,
No pressure.
but at some point in time, we're going to get Cooper in the school committee picture.
So hopefully he behaves himself.
you can ask. Officer Lewis, how old is Cooper now?
He's 8, he'll be 9 weeks tomorrow.
He's adorable.
He's gonna bark.
So I think tonight we had a few updates from sort of with Officer Lewis, I said Lieutenant Abadi is here as well, to share a little bit about some of the work that they've been doing this year in the schools. I just want to start to frame the conversation, just we appreciate how collaborative Officer Lewis, Officer Vatcher, Lieutenant Abadi, and also Chief Clark have been as we've worked through all different things throughout the year. Really been a team approach, and we appreciate everything that they're doing to support our students and support our schools. So Officer Lewis is going to introduce Cooper officially, I think, and then he's going to walk through just a couple of highlights from the year thus far. You see in the packet, Officer Lewis and Officer Vatcher have put together a lot of the different things that they've been doing, and then he's going to speak just to pull a couple of those out, and then we're going to close by sharing just an update to our approach to ALICE drills at the elementary level, and then close out for questions.
Thank you. So I'm Officer Lewis, the SRO here at the high school, or better known now as the guy who holds Cooper's leash. Thank you for having us here tonight. Officer Vatcher couldn't make it. He's under the weather, but he regrets he couldn't make it here tonight. So just a few highlights from what we've been doing in the schools this year. The number one thing I think is the most important is we have a lot of new staff, obviously, in the district and a lot of new administrators here. And I think the number one thing and the biggest highlight is that excellent partnership between the schools and the police continues. We feel very welcome in the schools still. We're getting a ton of support from all the building principals and new staff, and we're thrilled about that. The second major highlight would be that Officer Vatcher and I both attended and completed the SRO certification as mandated by the 2020 police reform legislation. Excuse me. Officer Vatcher also attended crisis intervention training and now joins the RPD crisis intervention team that I am also a part of. Let's see. SROs are working with the newly revamped district crisis team and the RMHS core crisis team to update all of our safety protocols and policies. As we go through them, some of them definitely need to be updated. They have old language that isn't used anymore, and also old contact information for personnel who don't work here anymore. Officer Vatcher has presented an anti-bullying presentation to Joshua Eaton fifth graders, and he's looking to shop this presentation around to other elementary schools as their schedules fit. Officer Vatcher and I will be presenting internet safety with the U.S. Attorney's Office at the Killam Elementary School in June. We did this, I think, 2 years ago, right before COVID. It was a big hit. Officer Vatcher has a similar presentation that he will offer to elementary schools principals other than the Killam, so for outgoing fifth graders. We are serving lunches again at the elementary school, which is also another huge hit, and always fun to see all the kids get a chuckle out of us wearing hairnets and handing them pizza. And the other major thing is the Comfort Dog program, which obviously started Monday. We picked him up Friday. We picked Cooper up on Friday. So he's gone through 2 major life changes in the course of 6 days. So he's been removed from his litter mates and introduced to a school with 1,300 students. He's doing really well. He's very popular. And it's a great success so far. I mean, students who have never said hi to me or talked to me or acknowledged me are coming into my office and we're having conversations. It's awesome. It really is. So I'm looking forward to having him fully potty trained, sleeping through the night, and rolling him out throughout the schools. And the last bit of information we have is the information Dr. Milichewski was talking about, which is the change in the ALICE protocol. So if Dr. Milichewski, if you'd like to address a little bit of that, we can touch upon it.
So we've all been collaborating throughout the year on all different things relating to school safety, other things that come up. One thing that we looked at this year is our ALICE protocols. We think, collaboratively between school district administration and the police department, that ALICE drills are sort of at the foundation of ensuring safe schools for our students and for our staff. One adjustment that we're making moving forward is we're going to move away from doing the live drills with students at the elementary level, and instead just focus on the drills at the elementary level with just staff. So we'll continue with the live drills with students at the middle and high school level. We thought just after, thinking about what makes sense for our students and what's appropriate for our students, we thought it made sense to shift away from that and then focus again on training our staff at the elementary level too. So we'll put that in place, effective immediately. I know there is a policy that that school committee policy that has some language around the expectations. There isn't a ton of specificity around whether the drills have to be student-specific. So I'm not sure if this is something that needs to be brought up and require a shift in policy, but it may be something that the committee may want to look at, or the policy subcommittee may want to look at. But tonight, we just wanted to share sort of our collaboration in determining that path forward, at least in practice moving forward.
Ms. Robinson?
Thank you, and thank you. I just have a question on, and I support your decision on the ALICE drills. I think you mentioned that the staff will still be getting training. Is there anything that's going to replace that to give the kids an awareness, or is it it's just going to be about training staff and not anything for the kids anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. Feel free to build off of, I know we've had these, I don't know, Officer Lewis, do you want to start with that?
I think we're going to be training all the staff. We can actually do a little bit more in-depth training with just adults than we can small children. And especially at the elementary school levels, the students really just do what their teacher says. So when they're under stress and they're scared, they look to the adult in the room, and their adult is their teacher. And if the teachers are highly trained, we believe that the students will be able to take the necessary steps that they can at that age level. So whether it's the teacher says it's time to leave, we have to go out this door, we believe the students will, like they do with fire drills, follow their teacher and go right out the door. If they have to go hide someplace, the teacher is going to be trained up on how to, educate the kids and why they're hiding and stuff like that. I think it'll be successful. It's a change in the way we've done it before, but I think just looking at how the drills go when we enter an elementary school, we just see that kids are just fully intent under stress on their adults. So we have faith that this should work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think from the very implementation of the program, it was always our goal for the school to be able to set the tone that they were comfortable with, whatever grade level it was. Even Dr. Doherty used to do separate presentations to each grade level that was appropriate for that grade level. And, the school is the experts on what the kids can handle. So I really think it's going to be a good transition.
Sean?
So I want to thank Officer Lewis, Lieutenant Body, and Officer Batcher as well for the partnership on this in particular. Tom and I had the opportunity to go to the Alice drill that was held at Killam back in the fall, and I think Officer Lewis, it was you that said something in the debrief session around the types of incidents that we're training for are so unpredictable, and none of them ever unfold the same way. And one of the things that I observed was the teachers were so focused on sort of like keeping the kids okay that I don't know how much they were absorbing in terms of like the drill itself. And so having the drills be focused on the staff will allow them to drill on sort of an options-based approach that helps them think about different scenarios and what they might do under different conditions. And I feel like this is a huge win all around. So I really appreciate the thoughtful partnership on this.
Again, it's important to keep it going so they're aware of, what our response is going to be, and it helps them make the decisions on what they want to do in certain situations as well,
Anybody else? I guess I'll just quickly piggyback on what Dr. Malachewski said there at the end about the policy. The policy is sufficiently vague and does give that. But if the committee wants it to be more specific to specifically exclude elementary, it might be something the subcommittee should take up, right? In the way that this is now going to be the action. That way, policy supersedes people on the go-forward basis, and it would have to be another more in-depth conversation if something were to change. But that's something for this policy subcommittee to consider as you consider other policies you're reviewing.
Duly noted.
Okay. All right. Anything else, gentlemen?
That's it. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
I just want to close with one thing too. I think Officer Lewis shared some of the things that they've been focused on and prioritized this year too. I think something he didn't share is that something I've noticed right away is just his visibility and Officer Vatcher's visibility throughout all of our schools. There's been times where I've gone to 4 different schools during the day, and I've seen them all in different schools interacting with students in very positive, proactive ways. We have SROs who are out in our schools, building relationships, get to know kids, meeting with families. They are everywhere, and they are building very positive relationships and being very proactive in that. So I just want to appreciate and recognize the work that they're doing just on a day-to-day basis that I think impacts our students in positive ways. So I think we're fortunate with the partnership that we have with both Officer Lewis, Officer Vatcher, Lieutenant Abadi, Chief Clark have been thought partners with us, all those different things that we've worked for. So I think we feel very thankful on the school side with just the partnership, the continued partnership that we have with the schools and the impact that that's making for our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're very appreciative of your support as well. Thank you.
Carla? Yep.
So I was in the high school just once this week and saw a crowd and saw you standing there and kind of said, oh geez, what happened here? And then I see the dog and I've heard also that kids were kind of walking to kind of seek out the dog at certain times during the day. So I think it's kind of hitting its mark.
Yes, he made his debut during MCAS, so he was a smash hit. So a lot of stress there, and a lot of students were grateful to play with the puppy for a little bit. Although they're very disappointed he sleeps a lot. So
I'm not sure you're getting him back, actually.
If I show up and we have a third dog now, my husband's not going to be happy.
All right. What do we think about taking a picture? I'd love to get Officer Cooper and Officer Lewis.
Kind of half asleep, but
yeah, he's
one of his
Silly.
his favorite toy is a gift from Kevin
Didn't go kill that thing. I'm not giving him back.
Yeah.
Just so you're fine.
Sarah, you a good photographer or bad photographer?
Where are we standing in front? Average.
Stand in front. Yeah.
Average, all right, you might.
We want to be in it? You're going to be in it. I'll take it.
No.
They won't let me do that.
What's that? Yeah, we got. Do you need a cough? Almost 10 months now.
What did you get?
Another Weimaraner.
How big is it get?
He's on track to be pretty big. Our last one was about 75 pounds, but he's 60 already at 10 months, so he might be closer to 80, 85.
Is he hypoallergenic or?
I thought you were going to say hyper, and I was going to say yeah, but
They all are, yeah.
I mean they're short-haired, so they're not terrible, but yeah.
We just have a Yorkie.
Yeah. Yeah, we've always been big dog people.
Walter. My kids want Walter really badly.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I gave you his phone, yeah. It's all downhill from there. It's all downhill from there. I know.
He's done.
Motion to adjourn.
We should get our own dog, and we can assign it like the liaisons for social media. Great.
Jazz music.
All right, let's move on. Back to the regularly scheduled program and public comment. There's nobody here, so we will move past public comment and on to consent agenda. So do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
And a second? Seconded by Chuck. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Carla?
If I could just recognize from Wood End, who received the Arbella Insurance Foundation Transportation Grant, that the subset of that was Bering Star. So they were the company who kind of submitted that through Diana Halsey in our community, who brought it to the school's attention. So thank you to all of them.
Carla, and you're missing some recognition there. Carla also helped bring it to our attention too, right? So I think that was nice, and I think I'm glad that we were able to take advantage of that. So thank you too
Yeah,
for
it
helping
was great.
elevate that for us.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All in favor? All opposed? And seeing none, it passes 6-0. And we will move on to reports. And Sarah, Dr. Hardy.
Hi, everyone. 2 items for you tonight. First, I just wanted to say I had the opportunity this past weekend to attend a fabulous event that was held here in our field house. It was the first robotics competition, and there was a team from Reading High School that I know they work right outside central office, and so we've had the chance to see them there working on their robot. Sometimes they're still down there when we go down after school committee meetings, and so they put in a lot of time. I was able to watch one of their matches, and it was a really great event, so much energy. About 40 teams competing with their robots from all over, high school teams, some work in collaboration with colleges, and some really amazing things happening. So I was proud that Reading was able to support an event like that and to see our students participating. The other thing I wanted to chat with you about tonight is just to fill you in on some progress in the area of literacy. As you know, this year we are rolling out a really successful implementation of a new math program. And so we have seen some success with implementation and have moved ahead to try to model that for literacy. One of the first things we launched, as you know, is the Reading and Writing Committee. And that committee has done some fabulous work to help prepare us to look at literacy programs. Recently, I was able to report to you on forming a literacy leadership team, a little bit of a tongue twister there. We call it the LLT for short. And the LLT has now had 2 meetings, and we have a group of teachers that represent all 5 of our elementary schools, preschool through grade 5. So we were able to fill in a few grades that we were looking for. We also are going to be inviting teachers from 6th grade to join the team as well, because we understand that anything that happens down at the elementary level has implications leading into middle school. So we want to build that bridge and that connection early on in the work. At the April 14th meeting, I will have a much more detailed update for you in regards to the work of the committee and ideas with our next steps. But at this point, we are just kind of in those beginning stages of identifying need and reviewing options. So I look forward to having more to share with you later.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Susan's not here, so Dr. Milczewski.
Great. 2 quick updates, one just logistical and one shout out. I'll start with the shout out. I'd like to give a shout out to all of the middle school students at Parker who participated in high school musical too. It was awesome. So I got the chance to go with my family too, but I was just blown away that these are students who hadn't been on stage, as we know, in a couple of years, and you would have had no idea. And it looked like a Broadway show. The kids really shined, and it was really, really well done. So I'd just like to give a shout out to all of the students who we know years ago sort of were prepared to step on stage and at the last moment weren't able to, that they persevered over the past couple of years and then put on what was really an awesome, awesome show. So a huge shout out to all of the students and all the families who helped to bring that together. And just a quick anecdote for that too. My daughters still don't believe that I know Sharpay's mom. So they don't believe me. So I
Made it very
swear-
clear she doesn't act like that at home, though.
Yes, so, but it was really well done, so a huge shout out to all the students. Then just a quick logistical update. At the last committee meeting, we talked about kindergarten enrollment and how we're at sort of a lower spot than what we would anticipate at this point in the year. We're ramping up our efforts to reach out to families who maybe we haven't reached before, but I just wanted to put out a plug to the community. If you know of any kindergarten age families who have not yet registered, if you know any siblings who have not yet registered, please, we want to be able to make decisions at the 414 meeting about where we're going from here. So please, it's important that we get those registrations in. So thank you for helping us just to network and spread the word in the community.
Okay, great. Moving on to liaison reports. Oh, any questions before I do that? Nope. Okay. We'll start with Sean.
Great. Just a quick update on the Reading ARPA Advisory Committee, the RAC. We've met, I think, twice since the last school committee meeting, including most recently last night, where the committee seems to have coalesced is around an approach where we're using a few sort of starter buckets of things that we might fund with the ARPA money, one of those being schools-related priorities. So we'll have the opportunity over the next couple of meetings to start to bring forward some of the priorities out of schools that would be sort of appropriate to fund through the ARPA dollars. It's purely directional at this point, but the starting bogey, if you will, is on the order of about $2 million. So we'll have the opportunity to bring some priorities forward and share those with the committee for consideration. The next meeting is on the 29th, which is a Tuesday. And out of that meeting, we expect to come out with sort of a starter list of some of the potential priorities, to have formulated a plan for gathering community input, both evaluating some of the priorities we identify and then soliciting other suggestions and opportunities that we could consider funding, as well as creating some general guidelines for how we'll, as a committee, evaluate the ideas that do come forward.
Can I ask-
Carla, go ahead.
Sean, so for the school side of it, is it the committee that's coming up with the priorities, or are you guys bringing to the committee what the priorities of the school are?
So Dr. Milichewski and the administration will be the ones bringing those priorities. And it'll be largely rooted in the discussions we've all already been having. I think we've already sort of surfaced a lot of those. But it'll formally be Dr. Milichewski and the team presenting those as opportunities. And the town manager will do the same for most of the town side priorities.
Am I simplifying this too much? Is it, have there been any discussions as to, once the money is divided up, that it just goes to the schools? And then the schools can, or is it like a selling feature?
I mean, as a purely practical matter, the money would flow to the schools, and, the school committee has that authority. I think as a just being pragmatic here about sort of, being good neighbors and good citizens, I think we would expect to fund the things that we identify as priorities that the committee agrees to fund. I think we would expect to make sure we fund those things. Purely legally, sure, the money flows that way, but I think that would be sort of the expectation and probably the right thing to do.
Aaron.
So I apologize, I missed the meeting last night, so I apologize if I'm asking something that became clear
That's okay.
in the meeting last night. When you say committee, I get confused whether you're talking about the ARPA committee or whether you're talking about the school committee.
Fair.
So I just want to clarify what, because I watched the first meeting, and it was not at all clear what was happening after that meeting. So if can I call it an ARPA subcommittee, ARPA advisory committee?
Just call it
The
RAC.
RAC.
Call it RAC.
Yeah.
Okay. If the RAC decides that the money should be split into buckets, that's still only a recommendation to the select board.
Correct.
Correct? So the
Yes.
select board would then have to say, yes, we're agreeing to a bucket for schools.
Correct.
And at that point, the administration can come to us and say, okay, if we have X amount of money, these are some ways we would like to see it spent. And then we decide, like, what's the?
I don't think, based on the discussions to date, it's likely that we're going to get sort of an unfettered, here's $2 million, schools, go do what you will with it. It's going to be part of a process where the school priorities are included in a long list of things, and some number of those will be funded. Again, it was just sort of a starting point for discussion. About $2 million was what the town manager, sort of proposed as a starting point for that discussion. And yes, the select board would then have to decide how much money to actually send to the schools. And again, I mean, it's similar to Carla's question. From a pure legal perspective, once the money's in our top line, we have the authority to spend it how we will, but in practice, we'll have gone out and said, these are the priorities. These are the priorities that we feel are a good fit for ARPA funding, and it's probably a difficult place to put ourselves in to not then go fund those things.
So I was out of order. So the priorities would be identified before the select board would decide.
Yeah, the actual
Like
dollar
this
amount will be
school
more
bucket
tied to
could be-
priorities and the cost of those priorities that we've identified, yes.
But our administration will still get the opportunity to advocate for the school bucket?
Yes. I mean,
There's a school bucket?
just to add a little bit to what Sean's saying as well is, it's, like you said, those are starting points, as Tom and Sarah and others start thinking about those things they'd want to put in those buckets, it might be only 1.5, it might be 2.5. At some point in time, the RAC will say, of all the things we've heard, we think this is the most fair, balanced approach to use the money, and select board, here's what we're recommending. And that might be 2.5, it might be 1.5 for us, whoever it is, but it's based upon estimates that Tom and team will have put against the overall priorities that we've discussed over a long period of time, really, as a greater group. Nothing that we've seen a number to yet, which is kind of the tricky wicket that we're dealing with, right? And Chuck frankly pointed out rather well last night is that some of the stuff that Tom may bring on Tuesday, we may not have seen those numbers yet, right? So I would encourage the committee, we will be posted, I would encourage you to try and attend that meeting on Tuesday as well, right? Just so you can see it and hear it, and potentially we can, do what we normally do when it comes to these kind of hard conversations as well. But the whole point there is, what are we doing, what would we want, and what does that look like from a cost bucket perspective? And then how do we, then RAC will say, okay, we've heard the schools, the schools really want 3 million, but we need to be fair. We need to do this much for water, we need to do this much for recreation, we need to do this much for other community priorities, and those are the 4 major buckets: water and sewer, recreation, which could include the field house, or could include Birch, it could include something else, other community priorities in schools. Those are the 4 buckets that are out there right now. And then we'll see, here's the recommendation, select board, approve it. There also is a possibility, and this is one of the things we talked about last night, that there might be things that we have more urgent need of, and so we might want to go to the select board for approval of those urgent needs earlier than, say, October. That's actually one of the things in our space that we probably want to do. And so there was some conversation about maybe there's a May or a June select board meeting where we can get some of that money, maybe not all of the money, but some of that money, said, yes, go ahead and spend that. Chuck.
Yeah. You've heard me say this several times. I think we need to be respectfully, very respectfully firm that nor the ARPA committee or the Board of Selectmen draws value judgments on any of what the administration, it's just about the amount. It should just be a discussion about the amount and not whether we need something or we don't need something. But, that's my opinion. But I really feel strongly about that.
It's a tricky line, and it goes to the legal side of things, like Sean was saying, right? This is a very interesting situation where, technically the select board controls that purse string individually and by themselves. There's no town meeting or anybody else who says anything about it. They don't control school spending, but if we want to have something to do with that, we have to work through in the process, right? So we have to figure out how best to balance those competing demands as we work through it, collaboratively and collectively as a town. Thank you for the questions. That's good. All right. Any further on that before we move on? Any other liaison reports?
All set.
Okay. Carla?
We are having a bylaw committee as we speak, so I will give you an update the next time. I attended the Democratic Town Committee meeting following Wednesday, and you two did a great job at the presentation, and that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Chuck?
you.
Yes, so the Recreation Committee, I don't know what.
You need them both.
Met last Monday, no. We met last week. And, we had the regular updates about what's going on with the fields and the Birch Meadow project, and they're doing a lot of work over by you at Sturgis Park. And we did get into a kind of a long discussion about, which I fully support, is, and Eric brought it up as well, was that, and I hope I got the name of the position, but a therapeutic program coordinator that would be part of the recreation department, and that's to bring recreation programs to students that have disabilities and things that I just think a lot of those kids are going to all of those kids are going to other towns now, and I think it's really important that we get that in here. I know that Jenna Fiorente, the recreation director, and is having conversations with the town manager about that now, and, you know, that may be something that he thinks fits into ARPA, so I think that's a good thing. I know that Jen Stiles sat in a listening session, and she was very helpful in kind of advising the town staff as to the needs for this. So more to come on that, but I think it's something that we definitely need to stay on top of and do for the kids in the community.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. Aaron?
No report tonight.
Sarah?
No report.
All right, Sean gave most of the RAC update, and we've already answered all the questions about that. Dr. Hardy mentioned robotics, but I just wanted to, you know, state pretty clearly the amount of volunteer effort that made that possible. It was over a 3-day period. They had to completely, you know, cover the floor in the field house. We've heard very, very positive feedback from other teams who are already planning to come back again about how well that was run. You know, the donations that came in from families, you know, near and far, the local community, you know, restaurants that supported it, whether it was Columbo's or Anthony's or whatever, that provided, you know, pizza and food and all that stuff. So I just want to thank the community for all of that work there. And I will also say that not only do, you know, you get to join, but State Representative Brad Jones got to join. And he and I had a brief conversation because he was very impressed with it. And he said, is there anything we can do from a state perspective that can support this? Can we have a potential earmark that we can put in that gives them some funding or something like that? So hopefully I didn't speak out of turn by saying that out loud, but I think that is something that is that season now from a state government perspective. So I think there's something there that it costs about $75,000 to run that program each year. Most of it is through fundraising. I'll also note that Andrew Grimes, who's on Bolt last night, spoke to me briefly about it as we were talking about potential CAD programs here at the high school. And his company has a foundation that does work in this space as well and would be willing to have conversations with us about a CAD program that we're potentially talking about, Dr. Milczewski, and potentially could support the robotics program as well. So all sorts of partnerships. Bring all the partnerships in that we can to support the students and the programs they're working on.
One piece on that too, the students from the robotics team have been reaching out to me consistently to give updates on their progress. They did ask to come to a school committee meeting to share some of the work that they've been doing. So I said they're welcome to come sort of anytime. So they said this is their busy week coming up to prepare for another competition, but they said that we can count on them to come sometime either in April or May. So I'll keep you posted on that too.
Great. If anybody didn't see it, it sits there and shoots hoops.
Yeah, they had.
And then it has to climb, like jungle gym type thing, to climb up and hang.
Was it last year or 2 years ago they brought their robot in here?
It must have been further than that, maybe even before me, so it must have been 3 years ago.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
We were on Zoom.
Yeah, it was.
We were on Zoom 2 years ago.
Time flies, we're having fun, Chuck.
The last 2 years.
But yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have them, and we still need to get Liam Sinnott in here as well and whoever else we got to figure out. We have to have like a celebration one for all the different awards that the students have done over time, so. Okay, good. Moving on. We're going to move on to the personnel action, which is the memorandum of understanding for the cafeteria employees. You know, just the committee knows the deal, but the brief readout of this memorandum of understanding. Michelle, would you want to do the brief readout, or do you want me to just summarize it real quick?
If you want to summarize it real quick.
Okay. So the summary of the memorandum of understanding, essentially, actually, Chuck, you probably would be best to summarize it because you were on the committee working on it. So I know I didn't ask you to prepare for it, and it's not in the packet necessarily. So if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I apologize.
So I can, you talk about the financial aspect of it?
Yeah, that's the essence of it, right?
So, you know, as everybody knows, we definitely saw a need and an inequity, really, with the way we were compensating our cafeteria workers. And this kind of all emanated from the last negotiation, and wording was put into the contract that a joint labor committee will be established to address it after the contract was, so that's what took place within the last 30 days. And we were able to come to an agreement where we did get, it kind of, I'll call it, had 3 parts to it. The first part was to get, I think, 1 employee up to minimum wage level, which is, yeah, we had to do. And then also get a good chunk of the other employees up to minimum wage, and then get them, so it'd be two bumps to get, because when minimum wage changes again, I believe in January.
Yeah, so minimum wage is going to change.
In January.
So right now, it's $14.25 an hour.
Right.
It will change on January 1st to $15. So we wanted to preemptively get the new wage, that's step 1, the new wage up right above 15. So it's at 15, now we'll start at $15.02, so that we will be above minimum wage for the duration.
And then, thank you. And then the third aspect of that was when we looked at that situation with getting the cafeteria workers up to minimum wage, it really closed the gap from their supervisors who had more responsibility. And so we had to figure out a way, and that was something that we talked about initially, and then they certainly brought it to our attention. So we were able to work out a stipend for them to be paid twice for the managers, which is 8 or 9 of them, I believe.
Yes, there's 8 of them.
Yeah, so that's the stipend was $2,000 per, so $4,000 each over the life of the rest of the contract.
Okay. Any discussion or questions from the committee? Okay, Sean, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the Memorandum of Understanding with Reading Cafeteria Employees, AFS CME Council 93, Local 1703.
All in favor?
We need a second.
Oh, sorry, yes, thank you. Second? Seconded by Chuck. Keep me honest, thank you. Now, all in favor? And all opposed? And it passes 6-0.
I can just one other, I
Absolutely.
really like to thank Michelle, Susan, and Danielle. I mean, you really worked well together and really did good work, and thank you. I know it's extra hours and extra day, so we really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm thrilled, and thank you so much for approving, because it's really important to us, and we're thrilled to be able to have this agreement with the cafeteria workers.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so now we'll move on, probably come right back to you, Michelle, I think. The school committee assignment to joint labor committees, and there is a memo in our packet, but Michelle, I hope you can walk us through it a little bit, and then we can have some discussion about who wants to fill which role.
Yes, so we have a number of joint labor management committees that are within the RTA contract. So we have outlined them here and on the slide, so they're in your packet as well as up on the screen. So there are 3 specifically that we need a school committee representative to serve on. So the first one would be caseloads, and the lead on that is Jen Sties. Allison Wright and Beth Levitt will also be on it, and this is to review caseloads across the district and make recommendations to the bargaining teams as to the overall program review of special education programs and learning center. So there is an opportunity for that. There's also going to be 4 RTA up to 4 RTA members for that, and they're supposed to kick off, very soon and go through September 2022. So that is the first one. There is the teacher assessment process, or TAP for short, and this group will continually review and refine the TAP educator evaluation systems. They're going to review the current DESE rubric. Talk about process and other documents. There'll be at least 8 RTA members on that. Assistant Superintendent Hardy will lead that. I will also sit on that, as well as Kevin Tracy. We are going to meet several times during the school year. And the last one is the RTA Salary Schedule, and that is to review the feasibility of adding a master's plus 15 and a master's plus 45 lane. Susan Botan will lead that one, and I will sit on that one as well, and a school committee member. We are set to kick off next month, and that work will go through June 30th of 2023. And that will to be advised for the next contract negotiation.
Okay. So in thinking about how best to do this, we can do it very simply, who wants to do something. And if nobody wants to, or if everybody wants to, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Or we can do like pick your number one. I think that's probably the most appropriate because there's 3 here. So everybody picks their number one if they want to do it. If you don't want to do it, that's fine too, right? We all have busy lives and busy days. We just need to fill 3 spots. So, if we start that way, I think that'll work, and then we might have to make a hard decision, but we'll also see if somebody just says, well, you do it as we go through it. So does anybody want to start with a preference? Carla's hand first, then Aaron.
I would love to be on this, the TAP teacher assessment process.
Okay. And Aaron?
My first choice would also be the teacher assessment.
Okay. Sean?
I was going to raise my hand for that one or the salary schedule. I don't feel strongly between the two.
Okay.
And I should clarify, I'm happy to participate in any. I just don't feel like I have any particular expertise to offer to the caseloads committee, so.
Okay, thank you. Chuck?
Yeah, I was going to say the salary schedule was a tap. I don't know that I have any, like Sean, particular thing to add on the caseload.
Okay. Sarah?
I'd be happy to participate in the caseloads committee.
Okay. So that means we have 2 people in each case, at least. I could have done any one of them as well. I'm happy to not do any of them as well. So, with that said, it looks like there's 1 person for caseloads. So Sarah, your caseloads.
You didn't say if you wanted to do one, so.
Yeah,
Again.
I could do it, but I'm happy to have you do
I'm happy to
it.
not do it either. Either way is fine. I'm willing to do it, but also if somebody has a burning desire
You're
to.
hired.
You're hired.
Okay.
Okay? So between Carla and Aaron, does anybody like passionately, fierely, want to be part of this, or what are your thoughts?
I'm very far removed from it, but as a former administrator, I used to do teacher evaluations, so I feel a little bit of a connection to it, but, and just as a high school parent, I feel particularly interested in it.
Okay.
It's something I'm very interested in. It's been, it was part of the reason, it's been on my radar for a long time because of just the experience with my children going through the high school. So it's something that I would really relish being on.
Okay.
Sorry.
Nope. It's all right. You're both interested.
Yeah.
Does the contract say we can only have 4 of our members as part of this?
Yes.
Only 4? Okay. Let me think about this a little bit more. Chuck?
4 total?
4 total, and we have Sarah, Michelle, and Kevin already, so it would be one of us, unless one of them wanted to step away, but I don't think we should necessarily ask that to happen.
Oh, not 4 school committee members, 4 on the.
4, yeah, 4 total. So there's only 1 opening on that spot right now. Chuck and Sean, any feedback on salary or how interested you are? Or Sean, you tap if you wanted to speak to that as well?
No, I think you have enough to choose from as far as TAP goes. I'm easygoing. I'm not going to lose sleep over it if we want to go with Chuck. One of the reasons I was very interested in this is I haven't had the opportunity to participate on a bargaining committee or anything like that at this point, and so I appreciate that experience. Going into my 3rd year here on the committee, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it either. So,
Okay.
We'll see where Chuck lands.
Chuck, what are your thoughts?
This is something that's kind of been getting kicked down the road for several years, and I'm glad that we're actually getting ready to do this, but I certainly don't want to monopolize. I just came off of the other one, so, and I have ultimate respect and faith in what Sean can bring to that, so, again, I don't,
Okay, so you're making it easy on me then. I'll take that. I'll take the victory lap on that one and take the easy one, and we'll put Sean in the salary one.
You like to fire me quick.
I don't like to fire you quick. You just said, hey, I'll let somebody else do it. And you did just have one of these, so it's probably fair to have somebody else do one of them too. Although, Sean, I will say, if there's questions from a committee perspective, this is the one I think that we as a committee probably need to make sure we hear more of. So from an executive session perspective or whatever, if you need, Chuck's been in that war room quite a few times. So we'll make sure we have that come back as we go through it.
Absolutely.
And Aaron and Carla. Do I flip a coin? You both want it. You're both qualified. You both have similar interests. Aaron, you bring a former administrator, but we also already have administrators on that group. So it's like, how many more administrators do we want to have?
I would be fine if you wanted to flip a coin, Tom.
I don't have a coin, so.
Rather than choosing.
Need a coin? We could have a rock, paper, scissors battle.
I'll just, yeah. What's that?
I said Ricky's the champion.
Don't mess with Ricky.
Do a rock, paper, scissors battle? That might be fun.
Here's a coin.
An actual coin.
The
yeah.
smallest possible coin, which makes it.
All right. That makes it easy on me.
Flip it, but.
I can flip coins like the best of them.
Is this the first ever flip on a school
committee? Sean, maybe we should go back to a coin.
I was going to suggest we arm wrestle. I was going to try to arm wrestle.
I was
but,
going to
you know.
say arm wrestle.
You want to arm wrestle?
I want these two to arm
That'll be
wrestle.
the first ever,
We need to
right?
liven up these meetings, come on.
Huh? I want these guys.
All right, so Aaron's heads, Carla's tails. And it's tails. So, there we go. Carla's going to serve on the TAP committee. All right, there are a few more that you have that aren't as pressing, but are some that we should be appointed to as well.
There are some ongoing committees. There's Professional Development Committee, which is just reviewing the professional development programs, providing input planning. The contract does not specify membership for this one, and it's to meet several times a year. And then there is a Technology Impact Committee. They assess the impact of technology on teaching, student learning, curriculum, communication, and professional day workload of education administrators. This one is also for members of administration, and the timeline for this one is this committee meets at the request of either side. There's not a formal meeting schedule for it.
Okay. So now I'm going to go to Aaron, Chuck, and myself and see if anybody has any preference of any of those. There's no bound timeline necessarily to them, but if anybody has a preference.
I'm confused. Do these ones need a school committee member, or it's totally optional?
They don't necessarily need a school committee member. The per PD one doesn't specify what membership looks like, and then the technology impact, if that's of interest to you, it's not necessary if there's not a pressing interest from the committee.
I mean, if you feel it would be helpful, I'd be happy to do the professional development one. If you feel it would benefit the committee to have school committee presence, but.
Yeah, I think, as Michelle sort of outlined, that I think the sort of the requirements of that, I think in practice, we would be thrilled to have a school committee member on each of these as well. I think to bring a different perspective, and I also see potential connections here between what the school committee's charged to do too, in both these. So I think it would be helpful if we can have one committee member for each PD and technology impact.
So did the Technology Impact Committee meet when we went one-to-one?
I don't believe there was a formal request from either the RTA or from administration to get the committee into gear.
Okay, so I mean, a technology impact is interesting. As Chuck knows, it was one of the more interesting portions of the negotiation as well. So, that's good. PD is one we've talked about as something we definitely want to spend a little bit more time on and focus on as well. So, Aaron, you want PD? Chuck, you want technology?
Yeah, I'll do technology.
Okay. I will backfill anybody. So if anybody's not able to make any of those meetings, let me know, and I can backfill that way as we do it, and we can go from there. Okay? And obviously, we can work about reassignments as part of the normal process. So Aaron, PD, and Chuck, technology. Okay?
The old guy in the room doing technology.
I won't comment on the number of times you've asked for different assistants. Well, that's okay. All right, so let's move on. We finished those assignments, so let's move on to the quarterly personnel update. And Michelle, we got some wonderful dashboards coming, I think, right?
I'm here with my dashboards. I'm very excited to be here to present the dashboard and also to kick off the start of our 2022-23 recruitment season. So you will have with you, I left all of you a nice little card that we are actually using as part of one of our recruitment materials. We're going to be going up to some career fairs, so in front of you have one of the takeaways we're going to be bringing with us, and on the back there's a nifty little QR code that brings you straight to our open positions, so that when we give these to candidates, they can link right to, look at our open positions, and hopefully click apply right away. So I want to just share those with you so you can get a sense of some of the stuff that we're doing. In addition, we now have a district tag count of about 981. You can see how that breaks down across each of the groups. And then we also shared the new hires since the first of the year. And you'll see that the majority of those new hires are in our para population, and we have, over to the far right, we have a school year 22-23. We have started recruiting for positions for next year as we receive retirements, or we know that people are going to be resigning at the end of the year. So this indicates 4. As of actually today, we have, number should be up to 6. We had 2 additional offers for teachers next year accepted, so we're thrilled with that we can get out early. And as you know, we've started the Wood End principal search. So that brings our total of positions hired since 7/1 up to 142 positions. We currently have 32 positions open. This does not include the extended school year positions we just recently opened or daily subs, because we have teacher, para, custodial, CAF subs posted to the website as well that anyone can apply for. Just to get a sense of the volume of, say, like the queries that we run, we have run 502 volunteer queries since the beginning of the year, 86 vendors and 344 staff. So that would be new staff, as well as every staff member is on a 3-year cycle. So we do track each of the queries and the dates they were last run, and then we have to rerun them every 3 years, where we reach out to the staff member and coordinate the new query. So we have that actively running as well. You can see our resignations since 7/1 is at about 37. Of those 37 resignations, only 4 of those were teachers, and we've since replaced all 4 of those positions. The other bulk that we see is 12 of those are paras and 8 are in the CAF. So paras and CAF really do represent the bulk of those resignations that we're seeing. Just for context, resignations that were effective through June 30th of last year was 96, and I estimate that we'll really see the impact of where we're at to be able to compare year over year is when we approach that June 30th date, because that's where the bulk of resignations and retirements are happening. So I'll have a better sense of where we are year over year. Transfers, we have had 132, either position changes or hours increase or decrease. And then we have had our substitute initiative going since October. Since then, we have hired 94 subs. I did provide a brief overview in my last update. So that is actually one area that I'm going to dig into on the next dashboard, is really that subpopulation. We have also had 70 leave of absences this year. Those are non-COVID related leaves of absences. COVID related absences, we've had 95, and I find that on average, each one of those absences is 5+ days. I broke down the leaves by category so you can get a sense of the type of leaves that we have, as well as what's completed, what's current, and what's anticipated. Of the long-term sub assignments that we have open, there's only one that's currently open, and it's a para sub. So you can get a sense of, what kind of leaves we have across the district. I am going to pause there for any questions on this first dashboard.
I guess I'll ask the standard question that we seem to always ask, and maybe you've had a chance to get it in place now, but resignations and exit interviews.
Yes. So after my last trip here, we have actually created an exit survey. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to have an exit survey, as well as I'm reaching out to the staff member to invite them to meet with me. So we have at least 2 touch points where we can gather this data, because I think it's really important. So I did take the over the course of, I was last year in December, we did create this exit survey that we're providing to people as if they resign, so that we can get some of this data.
Do we have any data yet, or is it still too early? Not yet.
We don't have any data yet, but I
The
look
process
forward
is
to
in
using it.
place.
We have the process in place.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other committee questions on this portion? John?
Just with the substitute initiative, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the table correctly. So if I look at March, 15 average daily subs with about a 50% fill rate would imply that we needed about 30 on a given day. Is that the right way to read that?
Yes.
She hasn't got to that page yet, you're ahead of her.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you started talking about the hiring, but not the actual, yeah, sorry. I'm going to hold my question. Yeah.
So with that, I'll segue to the next one. So I want to dig into the substitute data. We've had a lot of questions around that, and we've been running this great substitute initiative. We've gone 94 substitutes into the district. So a lot of them are actively working. So I wanted to dive into that data a little bit and really see what patterns we have. So in the first graph, you'll see what we do is we track every single day. When I leave the office at 5 p.m., what is our need for substitutes, and how many substitutes do we have signed up? And then when we come back in the morning, what do our numbers look like? So in the first graph, what you'll see is what we have for absences, and then the fill rate compared to those absences. So you'll see we're getting about halfway. When I come in the next morning, what you'll see is we have a bigger gap between our absences and our fill rate. So what that's telling me is the substitute pool, right, when we have those absences in ahead of time, people are able to sign up. A lot of these subs are working in different districts, so they're signing up for what's available. And if it's available the night before, we're having really good luck getting substitutes in. We are having trouble with the fluctuations in the rates when we head towards the next morning. So you'll see January is really high. We know we had very high COVID numbers at that point. And now you can see how we do come up with that fill rate from the graphs. So we are getting subs overnight, but it's just not enough to rise up to the level that we need in order to meet our overall total need. So some of the actions we've taken to try to combat this is we've had rate increases. So our non-licensed teachers, we've risen the rate has increased to $100 a day, certified is $105. We also recently moved up our reg ed and special education paras. They were at $12.50 and $13.50, so we brought those up above minimum wage, so that they're at $14.50 and $15.50, which was really important to us. And then our nurse sub, it was $125 a day. We did move that to $25 an hour, and so that they saw an increase there as well. So then the fill rates, So you can see when we started this, so we started tracking all this data in October, so we've had quite a few number of months. So when we started tracking it, our fill rate was about 26.1%, and that was only an average daily subs, we had 7. So now you'll see the trend start to increase. Even when our COVID numbers increase, we do increase month over month. February and March, we're hovering around that 50% rate, and we have 14 or 15 people in here. And that seems to be the trend. We have about 15 to say 18 people in here every day. And to break that out further, so we talk about those overnight absence fluctuations, I wanted to give you a sense of where we were at. So I picked last week, the beginning of this week and last week, so you could see how the trends were. So in the red, you'll see when we left the office the night before, how many subs that we needed. And when I came in the next morning, what that number looks like. So you'll see really just the deviation in the numbers. So what we're seeing is we are getting subs, additional subs overnight. It's just not keeping pace with where we need to be. I will take any questions now. If anyone has any, I'll give you a second to digest, because I know this is a lot of data to sort of dive into.
Now I'm ready.
Okay.
There you go, yep.
So two thoughts. One is, if we're getting 15 average daily subs and we've got 90-something sort of on the books, that implies that like 1 in 6 times any given sub is responding, right? Give or take. Have we thought about anything that would sort of just reward people for being more frequently responsive? If you can fill a need 30% of the time, there's some bonus at the end of the year or something along those lines. Maybe just a relatively inexpensive way to trigger an uptake there. And then the second question, or the second thought was this night before, night of thing, or day of thing. Airlines will sell more seats than they have on the plane because they know some number of people are going to not show up, right? I don't see a day in here where the delta between the night before and the day of was less than, like, say, 10 or 12. Have we ever thought about, posting for more subs than we know we need the night before so we can lock them in before they go off to other communities the next day?
A lot of schools do post, so I know Coolidge, JE, Burge, they very frequently will post for a floater para or floater teacher.
Yep.
So that someone signs up for that assignment and then they, move the person around as they need. The problem is that the majority of our, basically we're getting 30 additional absences between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. And at that point, people have made plans. People have decided to sub in other districts. And so trying to get, 30 additional people between 5 and 7 a.m., it's just very difficult for us to do.
Okay.
Some of the 94 are also college students, so they come and go.
And Michelle, what are your thoughts on the first question too? I don't think we've had conversations yet about really innovative or creative ways to maybe incentivize, but I don't know even internally with you and your team if you've sort of thought through any of that yet, or?
We haven't thought through, so we've thought through different things like, should we have building subs, right? So we have 2 or 3 people that they are just assigned to one building every day and they come in no matter what, and then they shift accordingly. So that is something that we were talking about. We hadn't had conversations about how to incentivize, say like at the end of the year with something. And that's something that we can explore.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Chuck? Aaron, you
Just thinking of our last conversation, is the regular education para, is that expected to have an adjustment in January to get up to minimum wage?
That is something that we can talk about. We haven't talked about it yet. Our focus was really getting it up from the $12.50. So we moved it up to the $14.50. And then we're going to have additional conversations as we approach January if we need to push that up more.
And we think these are now competitive with surrounding towns like Wakefield and Woburn, or what's your thought on that?
I think that our teacher sub rates are more competitive at the $105 a day. I think with the paras, What is difficult is our step one right now for a no degree para is 1526. So we were mindful when we did this to not, when we did bump up the rates, we didn't want to bump it up too close to where that step one is. And I think that's something we recognize and we know that we need to work on as we go into the next negotiation.
Aaron?
So, 2 questions. So you said some schools advertise like for a floater. So I imagine there are subs who are like, I'm only comfortable subbing at X school or X level. Is there a reason not to do that with all the schools, to be a little more proactive? Is it a preference of a building principal, or?
It's really the preference of the building principal. So we sort of leave it up to them to manage how they want to. I will occasionally, especially on a day where I know there's PD going on, where we need a lot of coverage for meetings, or when we were in the height of COVID, we needed a lot of extra subs. I'll reach out to the entire sub pool to say, hey, if you're around, we really need some extra support, if anyone's interested in working. But we do leave the actual sub management up to the building administration.
So then my other question is, with these big gaps, and this might be a question for Tom, what's happening? You know, if I'll be honest as a parent, I've heard of like my high schooler like not getting his class that day, like they went to the library because they didn't have a teacher, so that's a day lost of teaching. So what's happening in all these buildings when we aren't getting the subs? Same question.
And if we had a principal, this is the principal's sort of worst nightmare, I think, is every morning when you look, you know, the night before, who you need to arrange coverage, then you come in the morning, you rearrange coverage, and then all of a sudden, 30 minutes later, you rearrange coverage again, right? I think that it's a challenge that a principal faces every morning. I think there's a couple of just go-tos, unfortunately, are, yes, at the high school level, you have a little bit more flexibility because students can go to the library, or students can go to, you can have multiple classes in one space that can be that one adult can oversee. A lot of, unfortunately, having to pull paras, having to pull tutors, unfortunately. Those are probably the biggest go-tos, unfortunately, but it's a ripple effect, right? If you're pulling support, like if your classroom is planned to utilize a tutor effectively, and all of a sudden that tutor is then pulled away, right? We know that then has a ripple effect on sort of the student experience. So I think we realize here too, we have some work to do with just attendance patterns in general, right? Because I think that if you start to run the numbers here, you see here, we're talking on these charts out of 523 teachers and paras looking, potentially inputting on, their absences. And when you start to look at how many of those are absent, it's a significant rate. So I think that's another thing that we're battling, is not only increasing sort of the sub pool, yes, but also finding ways that we have to think through moving forward. How do we also make sure that we have staff in the building as much as possible as well?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the ripple effect. I mean, because then you're getting into like people's job satisfaction, right? If they're not able to do the job they set out to do, they were hired to do, they want to do, because they're constantly being pulled in other directions. If our principals are covering classes, because, I see it as a huge concern.
I mean, I can share, I think all of us have covered a class at one point this year, and I know Michelle has been over covering classes frequently too. It is a huge ripple effect on kids. And I know that teachers have expressed a lot of frustration when they plan, their day expecting to have certain supports, and then those supports aren't in place, that it's really hard for them to execute the level that we want them to execute as well.
And we've done some higher level management of the sub pool in terms of, I know I've pulled at least 3 or 4 subs out of the sub pool who are now in, say, like a para position or a long-term sub position. We had, there was going to be, we needed a long-term sub for a math teacher starting in April that we had hired. We then found out we had a last-minute leave in a different school starting in March. So we were able to actually bring him in earlier, have him work the month of March, and then in April we're shifting him over to the high school, and he's going to do that. So we are sort of moving pieces and doing what we can as we know situations come up. And we're trying to plan for as best we can with the numbers that we're having.
Sarah?
Two quick ones. Of the number of total daily absences, do you have a sense of the breakdown of para to teacher? What does that look like? Maybe I missed it, if you already said that.
I didn't break down the para to teacher, but it's very similar.
Similar? Okay.
Yeah, we find they're pretty equal.
And do you have a sense, Michelle, of multi-day absences of these? Are these kind of one-off things, or are these, what percentage are people who are out for 5 days because of COVID or for other longer illness?
We have about 12% of the staff that has 10 or more absences for the year, and that's not related to any long-term leaves.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment maybe for the future, for the committee, really. I think that, as we just went through our contracts a year ago, the committee's historically only been involved at the table with the teachers. I think it's important that this committee consider that we have someone in the para at that table. We haven't done that in the past. I think that that's such a critical piece and an employee in the district that we need to be more visible with them. So that's just kind of advice for the committee, I think, in the future.
I agree 100% on that one. I would say, why stop there, right? We have secretaries, we should be in all of them, really. So a lot of similar questions or feedback has already been asked, but first of all, thank you for the way you're presenting this, right? I'm a chart and graph guy, and I like seeing it that way, and it just speaks as well. The mountain charts are phenomenal from a gap perspective, so thank you for that. I was going to ask a similar question to Sarah with regards to trends, but I'm also interested in trends by school, trends by grade level, or trends by if you go into high school, is it trends by department, right? I'd love to see if there's anything else going on in there. And somewhat similar to the conversation about exit leaves, and assuming that we have to figure out how best to handle this, so I'll defer to your HR expertise here, but is there something to do with that 12% that we can ask? Is there something else going on? Is there anything else that, if we have kids that are out for 10 days, we ask, right? Is everything okay? Is there something at home that you need help with or support with? Or maybe they have young kids that are going through COVID. There's all sorts of other things, but building into that ask if there's something else there that we can support or enable. One of the things that we talked about in the COVID years was whether or not we would have, on-site daycares, for example, right? Is their daycare shut down because of a COVID outbreak and they now need to stay home with their kid? They're not sick themselves, but they can't go anywhere, right? Is there something else there that we could get at from a root cause perspective that might be worth asking without causing any sorts of problems from an HR perspective? So again, that's where I defer to you, but I have to feel like there's something there that with 10 absences that are non-COVID related, that's what you said, so.
So it really depends on the situation, right? Because if you have someone, so under the contract, there's a clause in each of the contracts that say for in the RTA contract, if a teacher is out for 5 or more days, we can ask for a doctor's note. So in a case like that, we have been asking for a doctor's note if someone's out for at least the 5 days. If it's non-COVID related, right? Because if it's COVID related, we have that documentation. And we're able, they're turning that in because we did have the emergency sick leave. So that we knew pretty actively. So if we are seeing someone that is out, we are asking for that doctor's note. So we do know in each of those contracts. I'm looking at who's out every day too. And if I'm noticing, a pattern of names, I do reach out to the principal. Then there's always the subset of people, right, that we know that something might be going on. Or maybe they're not acting like their normal self. So in those cases, we will check in with them to say, hey, is everything all right? Like, is there any support we can provide? We have EAP, we have FMLA, we have different resources that are available to you if this is something that you'd like to utilize or pursue. So it really is dependent on the situation. Some of them are one-offs that we can't manage. On Friday, we had 67 people that were out. A lot of those were single occurrences. So in a case like that, we're unable to ask any questions on that.
That rings a bell, because Friday was a special day, right? So 67 people being out,
It
kind
was
of,
the day after a special day, is that what you mean?
no, it was Professional Development Day.
You're that too, though.
That's what well, it was also the day after, St. Patrick's Day, but in particular, it was, Professional Development Day, so it was, yes.
Couple factors.
Couple factors there that don't quite sit well, but,
I wanted to say, I really like your thought on the root cause sort of analysis too, and our team does think a lot about if we're addressing a problem or a challenge, to think about before we start just attaching solutions, you want to figure out, well, what are the actual core root causes, so we make sure our solutions actually align to what the root of the cause is, right? The root cause of the problem. So that's really interesting, I think, about sort of the daycare challenges and just identifying some of those other barriers in place. So as we strategize in the future about ways to increase sort of staff attendance or incentivize better staff attendance, that we make sure that our strategies are responsive to what the actual root cause challenges are. So I think that's good data for us to continue to collect, either systemically or even anecdotally too, as we move forward.
John?
Yeah, I think the root cause thing is important, as you said before, kind of getting into solutions. I think the other piece of that, though, is like benchmarking. These numbers, it feels high, right? You look at this 8-day spread, and it adds up to like 3/4 of the number of staff, and I know it's not that some people are multiple days and that kind of thing. But I don't know, do you have any sense for how it compares to other districts, or do we have a sense of that?
We're trying to get that data.
Yeah.
That data is a little bit more sensitive and tough for us to get, but we're attempting to see if there's any school districts that would share that with us, because we really would like to see where we're at compared to others.
And I think as Michelle's collecting that data, especially locally too, we know nationwide, this student attendance has been a major challenge for district, and staff attendance has been a major challenge. So I think Michelle's working with her team to try to be more specifics around it, but this is not a problem or challenge unique to Reading.
Yeah. And I agree with all that. We definitely need to be mindful of the culture too. We don't want to create an environment where people are afraid to call in sick
Correct.
or whatever, so,
Carly, Debs.
I was thinking of EAPs when you mentioned it. Do we have EAPs that we work with?
We do.
Okay.
We do have an
Is
EAP
that-
that we work with.
Is that on town level or is that on school level?
Town level.
Oh, great, okay.
Okay. Anything final, Michelle?
And then the only other thing that you have is our just current open positions. Our updated position flyer is in the packet with the QR code on that as well for people to be able to link right to our website.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to take this chance to thank Michelle and her team, so Andrew and Kristen, not only collecting this data on a daily basis for us to look at trends together, but they're working really hard to address some of these challenges that we've seen here. I think one of the trends that's different in Reading than maybe a lot of local communities is right now we're seeing more subs here in Reading than we have, I know, in a lot of other places, because I think the team has been very thoughtful and strategic about how they're building up the sub pool. So I know the team, you and your team are working really hard on this too, and I think it shows in a lot of positive ways too. So thank you.
Thank you indeed. Okay, so we'll move on now to new business of the Student Opportunity Act submission and review. And we can switch over to those slides. And I think, Dr. Hardy, you're at the mic for this one, right?
I am, yes.
Can we make sure the small mic is near you so that everybody on TV can hear you?
Of course. Great. All right. So I'm pleased to present to you our thinking around the Student Opportunity Act. And I want to just set the context a bit to explain why we're presenting this to you and why we're putting together this plan. So this is linked to a change in the legislation around Chapter 70 funds. And the plans are one of the ways that DESE is looking at districts to indicate how they're supporting certain populations of students, selected populations of students that might be struggling in school. And the plans are developed and reported back to DESE. Those exact guidelines and procedures have not been outlined yet. And so as I go through this, I'll walk you through that a bit. But basically, the two key questions that need to be answered through the plans is, what are the key levers in the form of evidence-based programs that we are implementing to close gaps? And then what investments are we making in those evidence-based programs? So it's tying our budget back to the areas that these programs that we've identified that we believe will close gaps. The other piece of this plan too, especially what we're presenting to you tonight and what we'll be submitting to DESE, we're looking at the FY22 budget. So our current budget that we're in. So this is not about future planning. It's more about reporting the current plans that are in place. I had the opportunity to attend a few webinars to understand the plan and understand the expectations, and kind of the key takeaways were that DESE wants us to focus on evidence-based program selection, and this has been very well outlined for districts. There's specific guidance around what those options are. Another suggestion was really to thoughtfully engage the community. I feel like we're in such a good spot with Dr. Milichewski and I having gone through our entry plan and having lots of community input, and so I felt like that was a strength for us in moving forward with this plan. The other message that came through loud and clear is they want us in this plan to do a few things well. So instead of having a comprehensive strategic plan, this should not be a comprehensive strategic plan. It should be highlighting a few practices, a few promising practices that we're initiating in our district that we think will close gaps, not all of the things we're implementing. And again, that focus on implementation. What are we actually doing? What are we trying? So just a little bit more of additional context. I apologize for all of this background, but I think it's important to help set the stage. So originally, plans were submitted in 2020. This all happened just as COVID was beginning and districts were entering a new era of education. And so the plans that were submitted originally, and especially the one that Reading submitted, was a very broad, comprehensive plan that looked at including many student groups, many strategies. And so what we've done for 2020 under the direction of DESE is to really look at what is the updated guidance and format that DESE is looking for. And in this case, our plan, as you will see, is going to focus on 3 very specific student groups. And we have identified the specific evidence-based strategies that are being implemented, and then the assessment tools that will be used to measure the impact of those evidence-based programs. Specifically in the plan, there are 4 commitments that DESE asks us to look at. The first one being looking at which students we are going to outline the plan around. So groups of students that we feel are not, where there are gaps in our district, are not having the same success as their peers. And then identifying those specific evidence-based programs that we have in place that we believe will start to close those gaps for students. The third commitment, which is mentioned here in the plan, is monitoring that success. And so again, you'll see that DESE has given us a list of things, and we've selected the assessments we think are most relevant. And the final one is engaging families, particularly the families of the groups of students we've selected, in order to ensure that what we're thinking is aligned with what they believe would also be best too. When we looked at commitment 1, we decided to, for this plan, to focus on 3 groups of students: our English learners and former English learners, low-income economically disadvantaged students, African American and Black students. And these were students that continually rose as we looked at data and as we heard from the community as groups of students who were not meeting with the same success as their peers. For the second commitment, we looked at the evidence-based programs, and this was a set list from the Department of Education. These were not evidence-based programs that we were making up from scratch. And it was a list of about, I want to say 15 to 20. And we looked through and identified the ones that we as a district have been focusing on and we feel will impact the success of the student groups we've identified. One thing I want to point out here is that you'll notice that these programs really target what I think in some ways is Tier 1 instruction, and you've heard me talk about this before. In order to ensure all of our students are successful, we have to make sure that the Tier 1 instruction that's in place is set up and designed to meet the needs of all kids. That's not to mean that we won't have Tier 2 in place, because we know 15% or so of our kids are going to need that. But if we have Tier 1 instruction in place that's not, from the start, set to meet the needs of most of our kids, then we will not be successful in closing those gaps. The three areas that, the three evidence-based programs that we have decided to outline in our plan are research-based early literacy programs in pre-kindergarten and early elementary grades, acceleration academies and/or summer learning to support skill development and accelerate advanced learners, and expanding capacity to address social emotional learning and mental health needs of students and families. I'll just point out something. This is just purely logistical. You see after each of these statements is a letter. This is tying back, which I will show you on the next slide. This is tying back to the actual language from the law that states the areas that, the program categories that can be used and outlined in these plans. So that's just in there for your reference. Awesome. All right. So as we move into the commitments 2 and 3, it's where we start to tie back funding that's in our budget to that supports these evidence-based programs. And so these are examples of some of the items that are in our FY22 budget that support, and I'll just quickly go through these. For the early literacy programs, we have a current accelerating literacy grant. We also have ARP grant that was used towards early literacy, and then portions of our operating fund have also been used to implement a new position, a district-wide special ed reading coach. The acceleration academies and or summer learning, you've heard me talk a lot about the work we've done there, so we've invested money from this year's operating budget into that. We also have some grant funding where we're offering tutoring, summer tutoring for EL students, and we are looking, we looked as well last summer as summer programming that was also through a grant. For the final area, addressing social emotional learning, in our FY20 operating budget, we did increase the FTE and stepping stones, and then through the ESSER grants, we added counselors and an SEL program. One thing I should note, in this section of the plan, when we fill it out, they are looking for a variety of funding sources. It's not just Chapter 70, so ESSER and other grants also should be mentioned. I think they really want to see that multiple funding sources are being used and committed to these evidence-based programs. Okay. And so Commitment 3 speaks to how we will continue to measure success. And from the list that was offered, we felt that these 3 would be the top things we would look at because these are kind of the areas where we've started and identified some of the student gaps. So looking at student achievement in ELA MCAS, student achievement in Math MCAS, and then English language proficiency. So as that data becomes available, we'll take a look and see how the selected student populations did. And then the final commitment, engaging all families. The SOA plan really does address the concerns that we've heard raised by caregivers over the past 9 to 10 months or so. We heard regularly that the impact of interrupted learning caused by the pandemic has really been disproportionate on certain groups of students. We also have heard broadly that early literacy needs to be a focus for us. And similarly, that the social emotional needs of students is kind of at the forefront of everyone's mind. So I think those align well with the evidence-based programs that we selected. Okay, and that is the end. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or provide additional information.
Sarah.
Thank you for that. I just have a clarifying question, maybe. So I know from the previous SOA submission, the 3-year plan, it identified, I think, 5 or maybe 6 student groups.
Yeah.
So I notice a big one is missing, and from my point of view, the students with disabilities is missing from this group. I think there are a couple others as well. So how did you land on those 3 groups, and what made you decide to focus on those specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so what we were looking at partially too was the scope that DESE's looking for in this plan. The other piece of it too that's a little deceiving is the word plan. It makes it seem as if this document will lead us to take certain actions or not take certain actions. And that's really not the case. It is part of just our reporting out as to how we're addressing certain student groups. DESE looked for us to identify 2 or 3 groups and then 2 or 3 evidence-based programs, so we elected to go with 3. I think we felt that these groups are smaller and perhaps don't get broader attention, where I feel like many initiatives and kind of a bigger scope of work is underway to address the needs of our students with disabilities. So this was highlighting, I think, some of those groups that may get overlooked in our district as well. I can speak for myself, just having since written this plan and really fully invested in these groups has actually helped me in a few situations where I think I would have overlooked a particular group of students, and now it's just highly alerted that how are we actually making sure that we've reached, if we're communicating an opportunity, how have we actually ensured we've reached the parents of those students instead of assuming that when we send this out to the general population, that they're going to take the invitation and be able to participate. So that was really more the thinking, Sarah. Not as an exclusionary measure, but more as who are the groups we need, the smaller groups we really need to focus on.
Thank you.
2 questions. Could you go back to commitment 2? Or I can just reference it.
Yeah.
2 more, 1 more. Yeah. I'm just, it's probably obvious once you say it, but I'm not connecting the dots between the acceleration academies, vacation academies, and E, which is around professional development, I think.
I'm not sure, those letters were not provided by me, they were provided by DESE.
DESE flags acceleration academies and summer learning as related to professional development?
Yes.
Interesting, okay. I thought that was our.
No.
Thing. Okay.
No.
Okay. And then on commitment 4 on the last page, I was I guess a little bit surprised to see the framing of this page as sort of rear looking or backwards looking, in the sense that, it says like we're addressing concerns that have been raised in the past. Does the plan submission have any sort of expectation or requirement or content around how we're going to continue to engage families as we execute on these programs and measure results and things like that?
So I think it's built in, it's part of the philosophy of the plan, and I think that's why they call them commitments, that throughout this process, so it's not, it's not just like a one-time occurrence, but that throughout we're cognizant of gathering information from families as we go. Part of the implementation is looking at, under each of those evidence-based programs, is like what the implementation plan will look like. And so part of that at every point should be how we're engaging families in that work, to make sure that we have full student participation, to make sure that we're monitoring for student success, et cetera.
Thank you.
I'll just, say I was struck as well by what seems to be a post-fact report as opposed to a plan that is actually a plan. So that's very interesting that DESE decided to go down that route. Did they give any background about why they changed the thought process there? Or
It seems that they're learning as they go. And we asked some, pretty specific questions. When will this be assessed? When will we be reporting results? And they indicated they will let us know.
Sounds familiar.
Okay.
You have a very nice way about you.
I was going to say thank you for working within the parameters you were given.
No problem.
Yeah, it's just because there's so much more if you go back to commitment 2 and 3 that we have planned
Mm-hmm.
for next year.
Correct.
I mean, it's,
Yes, and
I mean, it's like, this is, I hate to say it this way, but it feels like that's like a chump change slide. And we've put so much more into that going into 23, and we're advocating for
Yeah.
even more going
Well,
into 23.
And I will say that it did factor into our thinking. I mean, obviously, we were thinking about our priorities for this year in the FY22 budget, but we were thinking ahead. And when we decided on these three, it was very much forward-thinking as to the investments that we've made, thinking about the budget process we went through recently. So I feel like these should sound familiar to you because they are the types of things that we've been talking about, the types of things that have been raised by your concerns and by the families, by our staff. So we were trying to be forward-thinking as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was the next slide, the funding one, that I was just like, really? Because I feel like we've put so much
Yeah.
more into these kind of key things than what's listed here.
We
But they're
did.
only talking
We
about
will.
FY '22.
Yes.
And, yeah. You think about it from a $50 million budget, and
My assumption is we'll be updating it next year, and we'll be able to add in the items that, we should feel very proud about.
So we know what we're doing.
yes, exactly. I feel much more strong about what we've done and what we're planning to do than what this. Thank you for playing within the realm of what they told you to play within, but it feels, I want it to be a bigger plan, but we'll get there, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not under SOA, under our own guidance, I suppose. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, you're
And I
very
think we are going to vote here as well, even though I think technically we don't have to, but we will anyway, since you brought it to us, we'll vote to accept it and move our way forward. So Sean, if you don't mind?
I move to approve the Student Opportunity Act submission as presented.
Yeah, second? Carla with a second? Any final questions or comments? All right, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. Okay, that concludes our meeting. I'm waiting for one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sarah. All right, and all in favor? All opposed? And we are concluded. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.